And we are live. Hey, everyone, and welcome to episode 62.
62.
62
Bonkers.
of Three Pagans on Tap. It is just Sarenth tonight because I'm over at his house, so we're hanging out. Apologies for the episode being late this month. I was violently sick the first week. I had full food poisoning. It was not fun. About 36 hours of fevers and just horrible.
Yeah, nothing you want to run a show on.
No. And you okay if I talk about it?
Yeah, please.
And Sarah just got out of the hospital, so we are drinking coffee tonight. It will be a sober show for the first time in a while. We've done a few, but it's been a hot minute.
Yeah, it's been a little while. So just a simple Folgers with 9 what do you call them? Scoops. There we go. 9 scoops.
Yep. I added syrup to mine because I am sweet tooth. Must have sugar and coffee.
Mine is just straight up black.
Very nice.
This particular mug means a lot to me because it's the last gift my grandpa Piper gave to me before he passed.
Very nice.
Yeah. This is the Papa mug.
Well, here's to that.
Here's to them. And don't worry, folks. The ancestors have plenty of coffee upstairs.
Yes, indeed. Hey, Destiny. Hey, Emily. Nice to see y'all. All right, before we get too much into it, I'm going to go ahead and say the prayer.
Please do.
Hail to howl and silence, the breath spark of life, and the death who waits for us all. Hail to you, spirits of communication, subtle and explicit, silent and spoken. Let us speak well, see well, hear well, and understand. Thank you for messages well spoken, well received, and understood. You who are so much of relationship, of pack, subtle and yet not. Thank you, holy ones, for all that you do and all that you are. Pack warm you and keep you. Pack warm us and keep us all.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
So, the theme for tonight is basics and foundations. This is something we've talked on the show about quite a lot before, but I don't think we've ever dedicated a whole episode of 3-pot to it. And if we did, it's far enough left back, I don't fucking remember it.
Yeah, no, I don't think we have. And frankly, with the political climate in the U.S. being what it is, I thought it was a good thing to have because it's really easy for that to slip.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like,
I've slipped.
So have I.
When you get sick, like if you're not like really on top of it, or if you don't have somebody that's with you that's on top of it with you, it's really easy to get out of the habits that help keep you safe and healthy.
Yeah. And added stress, any changes in schedule, anything can throw you off a routine.
Yeah.
And not everyone has all of the training and basics that you and I have over freaking, 25 years between us? Most of that yours? You're welcome.
Most of that. Yeah, I became a pagan in 2004, so that's 21 years.
Jesus.
No,
not Jesus. You're right. You walked away from Jesus. You're actually an apostate. And technically, we both are, but I was never Catholic, so it doesn't apply to me as much.
The interesting thing about the 21 years that I've been a pagan, it's interesting how much in the last 5 years the general advice has changed from folks outside of our circle on how to ground, center, shield, all that, cleanse. Because when I was coming up, the only thing you had available was, like, for grounding and centering, was the tree meditation, deep breathing, or maybe smudging, which that's a whole other fucking rant. But literally, like, there was like a handful of techniques that pretty much every book you picked up on witchcraft or paganism was going to teach you how to do. And it was damn near the same one.
No.
So the basics have come a long way from being just utterly basic.
Yeah.
Which is nice, especially for like neurodivergent folks who don't jive with, say, visualization, or if they have aphantasia, if they have
lack of proprioception, any manner of things, right?
Right. So a lot of how we do the basics nowadays is much better informed than what it used to be.
Yeah. For folks who have not heard, aphantasia is the inability to visualize internally.
It exists on a spectrum.
Yeah.
So you got some folks who can imagine the outline of an apple, but can't distinguish any of the features of it in their head.
Some people who get absolutely no image, and all the way up to like a friend of ours is on the hyper visualization end of the field.
Right.
They get actually sometimes
too much
visualization.
Overwhelming visualization.
Right. Like they have to be careful with like horror shows and stuff on like podcasts and things.
Because they'll pick it up.
It's the visualization is so intense for them, it can be disturbing.
Yeah.
So it's not like hyper visualized. You're blessed.
No.
It's both ends are fine.
It's a spectrum, just like the luck or unluck of somebody in that situation.
Right. Yeah, and it's really interesting because a lot of those techniques were what I learned, right? The tree meditation is super basic. Everyone's seen it. I shouldn't say that. Many people have seen it. It's very popular.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't used the tree meditation in probably 2 years, 3 years.
I connect with the world tree, but that's different.
Yeah.
But mostly what I work with as far as my spiritual hygiene routine, it's it's on my blog, my Sarenth@wordpress.com. I actually have a section where I talk about the basics of how I do cleansing, grounding, centering, and shielding. And if you've taken my Heathen Mouth Magic course, it's basically that.
Yeah.
With some added runes that I won't go into here because that's mine to know.
Yeah.
But you're basically cleansing with Ansus, grounding and centering with Gabo, cleansing and empowering shields, or putting up wards with Kanas. Those are like my 3 basics.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good set. It's funny, if I were to do that, I would pick completely different runes,
which is
natural,
absolutely.
But it is very interesting. I also recently had a blog post tangentially related to this because Sarenth commissioned me in January to do a blog post about how I would train somebody up in pack tradition who had basically no prior knowledge. And I went through a whole rant. It was long.
At least 2,500 words.
Something like that, yeah.
It was nice.
Yeah, no, it was good though. Only part of it covered any of this, but like, So pulling even farther back, what do we mean when we say basics?
So since you set this one up, why don't you talk about how you see the basics in foundational practice?
Yeah. So I would split basics into basically 3 prongs. Discernment and thinking skills, but I don't think that that's what I want to focus on tonight. Self-work, which is basically meditation, grounding, centering, and shielding. And then devotional work, right? Basic offerings, basic altar upkeep, things like that. Basic devotional relationships. These are, I would venture to say, even every layperson should have at least the basics of these down. Obviously, once you get into advanced practices, then you need more in depth. But
my caveat with all of this always is it depends on the strictures of the tradition you're going into. Like if you're a Wiccan and you've got certain ways of doing things, like I'm a first degree Georgian. I know that Georgian Wicca takes its roots from BTW stuff, and what they do is a particular flavor of witchcraft. And so BTW, for those who don't know, is British traditional witchcraft. Georgian, which is a new religious movement here in America, was brought over by somebody who was in the lineage of Gerald Gardner and said, okay, that's cool, but this is our own offshoot, basically. If I am remembering that correctly, it's been a minute since I looked at my notes. But long story short is that depending on the tradition that you're part of, your basics, like for instance, like completely opposite side of the field, as a Catholic, the basics are a relationship with God, with Christ, the Holy Spirit, and then doing your prayers and then living the word.
Yeah.
Very different from what we think of as pagans, very different than what magical practitioners think of.
Yeah, no, for sure. And most of that I would wrap up under devotional practice. And that's kind of a focus thing, right? A Catholic lay person isn't going to have a magical practice or anything like that, and doesn't believe in the reality of a number of things. That
depends on how you define Catholic.
Yes.
Because a lot of them are dual tradition, or there are a lot of Voodoo-sants who consider themselves Catholic.
That's very true.
While being part of Voodoo.
No, and that's very true. I would say Catholic lay people, Catholic laity would.
Right. My point being is that this is where the conundrum comes in, because many of these people see themselves as Catholic laity.
Oh, that's interesting. Because I would, yeah, no, and that's
for the purposes of the church, they are, because they're not deacons and they're not
bishops or priests or anything. Yeah, no,
if they're not officially part of the hierarchy, you're laity. Like, there's a very distinct difference between laity and the clergy, and that sometimes finds its way into pagan circles, which is very fun, because not only are you bringing all that baggage with you, but the power structures and the investment of power in that, you can see echoes of it with how old school occultism comes around.
For sure.
Either as a reaction against, or in the case of the Rosicrucians, a different kind of embrace.
Oh, yeah.
So again, the basics is going to really depend on your theological worldview.
Yeah.
More coffee?
I'm okay for now.
Okay.
Thanks, though.
Yep.
As we're both on midnight schedules, Sarenth and I have agreed that we just live on caffeine at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So basics, as I'm going to approach it tonight, is going to be, I assume, polytheist, animist in general. Specifics from worldview after that. I also assume that evil, at least little e evil, exists in your world, and that there are spirits who are at least not friendly to humanity or individual humans.
We could say this kind of writ large, that evil in this context means somebody that is willing to inflict harm, in order to get what they want.
Yep. So
it's not a very well.
It's not a super well theorized, or
we're not laying down the philosophy of this particular time. We're just trying to put words together in a direction and get the ship moving.
These are kind of our base assumptions. If that doesn't work for you for a variety of reasons, this may be less applicable. But
I generally tend to look at not spirits as good or evil. It's, are they disposed towards good relationships with us, or are they not?
Yeah.
Like, there are certain spirits that I just will not play with because there's no reason for me to, and that opens me up to all kinds of stupidity.
Yeah. Is
that spirit in particular who might shoot me evil? Maybe, maybe not. But because I understand spirits as beings unto themselves as people, I think ascribing that to a person or a group of people is just an invitation to flatten differences and miss nuance you're going to need.
Yeah.
But I generally tend to follow along similar lines with regards to how I construct what the basics are. Relationships are like number one, followed by any kind of activities of daily living that actually makes you a polytheist and animist. So this can be, are you doing your daily devotionals? Are you doing your spiritual hygiene? Like, really root stuff that differentiates you from just somebody who's kind of cruising through life.
Yeah. So why are the basics important?
Well, the basics are important for a number of reasons, because it's the foundation that you build the rest of the religion on. And the thing with foundations is you really need to at least zero in on, do I feel enough pull towards one worldview or the other? And if you're an atheist, that's fine, that's dandy. Why do you want to be involved in the religious sphere is a question you should ask yourself. And that's honestly a question you should ask yourself regardless of what your theological worldview is.
Yeah.
What's your point for being here? Because if it's not to develop relationship and personally, you're kind of missing the point of having a community like this.
Yep.
With the theological worldview, I don't mean you need to have this like absolutely broken down to pieces where I know how every little minute thing in my worldview works. That's not fucking necessary. Partly because polytheism and animism are both orthopraxic rather than orthodoxic. They're important. They're two sides of the same coin. But if I absolutely had to pick one, polytheism and animism are orthopraxic over orthodoxy.
No.
Because there's a lot of room for what this particular interaction with a spirit or a god or an ancestor means to you. That being said, if we understand that there's an orthopraxy, there's an orthodoxy behind it.
Yeah.
And the foundation idea of polytheism and animism is that we are in relationship. Like that is the root, if you will. So the foundation that you're building off of is this core idea of I am building relationship with gods, ancestors, spirits, the world around me, myself. So the very foundation that you're building off of, the basics that you're engaging with, further in some way, shape, or form your ability to have a relationship with something other than yourself, or enhance the relationships you already have.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that. I agree completely. And it's funny you say that because I would still start with self first and then move to relationship.
Sure.
And the reason that I say that is because a lot of these relationships require, or at least heavily suggest, doing things a certain way, and it's hard to do that, right? It's hard to approach relationship with outside spirits correctly. And yes, there is a wrong way to do things. I don't think that there is a single right way to do things, but I think that there are many right ways to do things and many wrong ways to do things. Mm-hmm. But approaching them in a good fashion, I think, requires certain things. Mm-hmm. I think that being able to cleanse well is part of that. You wouldn't serve guests food with your hands that are muddy and bare. Don't make offerings that way.
Right.
It is generally speaking unwise to walk around in public buck naked, regardless of legality, because it's real easy to get harmed that way. Right. And on a very basic level, if you don't know yourself well, then it is really hard to do discernment or have any kind of relationship because you don't know.
Right. The reason I start with relationships as a foundation mm-hmm. is partly because it's the purpose for why you're there. Yeah. And I'm using this very, very loosely this is a foundation to get started off of. Because if your starting line is, well, I really like Thor in the Marvel comics, that's fine, but understand that the thing that you're going to be developing a relationship with is not found in the comics. Like the person you're going to develop a relationship has very little to do with the comics, even though it might be a gateway for you to investigate further.
Yeah.
The other reason why I say relationships are so important is partly because of the shared identity of people who worship these gods. When you come to heathenry and you say, well, I had a dream that this one-eyed man came to me, you're going to get a very distinct answer. And if you go to somebody else to say the same thing, like in a Kemetic sense, you might get a different god entire. Yeah. Very unlikely that you're going to have somebody go, oh, that's definitely Odin, and you need to go over the heathens. There's one-eyed gods in Kemeticism as well.
Yeah. I didn't even think of that. That's absolutely true.
So like on a baseline level, the relationships are the foundation, and they're also part of how discernment plays out in a lot of these cases, because once you've made basic inroads into the whatever the lore is, you also got to kind of rely on your relationships with other people in order to not get lost in the weeds.
For sure.
So that's my purpose to it. But I also agree that the personal reflection, the personal discernment is absolutely needed, because the other danger of a lot of these groups that we're finding, especially this latest round is TikTok, but these kinds of groups have come and gone regardless of what time period you're looking at. Groupthink is a really dangerous road to go down. The bite model is your friend.
Yeah. The bite model is a way to one way. There are multiples, and it's not foolproof, but it's one kind of handy mnemonic for discerning cult behavior and mentalities, as differentiated from cultic, which is worship behavior, versus cult behavior as in like high control groups.
But again, having relationships with a lot of different people within the religion at hand can make this a bit easier, simply because not everybody in heathenry is going to agree with each other.
Yeah.
I mean, ask 5 heathens, you get 10 answers.
At least.
And some of us aren't, some of us will retain the ability to change our mind tomorrow.
Absolutely.
So when it comes to that, like, if the nice thing about it is that you can dip your toes into a lot of different waters in order to figure out if this way or that way actually works for you. There is a difference between exploring and dabbling, and that's where I think a lot of the metal meets the meat. Exploring means that you're actually going to dedicate yourself to a path for a particular point of time, see where this road goes, whereas dabbling is just, I'm going to maybe show up, maybe think about doing things in the religion, and if it gets at all frightening or scary, I'm just going to turn off from it and not worry about it at all.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad way, especially if you were completely buck-ass new to any kind of animism or polytheism, isn't necessarily a bad way to go about it, because if you've never dipped your toes into this philosophy of life, it can look really fucking weird and intimidating from the outside.
Yeah, no, for sure. So steering us back on topic just a little bit, because we kind of wandered a little, I think. So what would be your first thing that you would have people do for like basics?
So the basic practice that I always encourage people to do is build relationships with the ancestors you know. I kind of come at it from a two-pronged approach. Go with the gods you already know. Go with the ancestors you already know. If there are spirits that you have connections with already, go with them too.
Mm-hmm.
And usually this takes the place of the husvitir or home or housevitir spirits that you're living with, because they have your vested interest in mind, generally speaking. So build relationships with the beings you already have the ability to put names to faces with, whether it's your local land spirits, whether it's ancestors you knew in life, or whether it's gods. Now, the caveat to this is if your ancestors obviously would deeply disagree to the point of disowning you, go back further, because statistically speaking, not all your ancestors are going to be assholes. The other part of it is, at least starting here with ancestors you know for sure means that you're not going to get hoodwinked as easily if they start asking you for things.
Yeah.
So like my basic foundation is choose the relationships you're going to start developing now and commit to a daily or a weekly practice. And it can be 5 minutes a week.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't have to go whole hog and have this eat your life right out the gate. I don't advise it, actually.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Yeah, I know. So when a lot of people come to me and like, I have no idea where to start, it's like, okay, figure the relationships you want to know, that you want to develop rather. Figure out what practices you can fit into your life where. And generally speaking, I just start people off with a spiritual hygiene routine that is dead simple. One form of cleansing, one form of grounding and centering, and one form of shielding. I don't even necessarily have them make words off the bat, because especially if you're fresh new to this, it'll be too much.
Yeah, frankly. And honestly, especially if you're already developing a relationship with your house spirits, they can kind of act as bouncer anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I mean, like, honestly, the easiest thing to get somebody to do is like, put out a cup of water once a week for all your gods, ancestors, and Vaethir.
Yeah. If
you can't do that, you need to rethink what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like if you cannot commit to a cup of water once a week, I say this because I fucking had this argument out with somebody. If you can't commit to doing that once per week, you need to really, really, really think of why the fuck you even want to come into this and do this in the first place. I had somebody arguing with me up and down. I think it was on Tumblr or a group I was in at one point, who was like, well, that's really ableist of you. And I laughed and said, what? I'm sorry, but if your body is so broke down that you can't do the offering yourself, you can ask people to make those offerings for you. You can find a way. Like, if you can't try to find a way once a week to do something, at this point, you're making excuses. Why do you want to be part of this?
Yeah.
Like, I can take an explanation of, I literally am a quadriplegic. I can't make offerings with my hands. Okay. So there's a bunch of other things that you can do. What can you do? And can you do it once a week? And like I said, even if it's just prayer, like, be real bare bones with it. Even if it's just prayer, stick to it once a week. Don't overload yourself.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. And the other thing to keep in mind for folks listening is what is, as Sarenth has already said, what is basics will change kind of depending on how you're doing with things, right? If someone was coming to me for like priest work training, I would say trying to stick to a once a day schedule would be better. Not always attainable. I don't manage to do every day. I do my best, but I don't manage it.
I think the important thing about like the basics and foundations writ large is that nobody gets them 100% of the time. I mean, if some of the clearest examples we can point to of deep devotion to their craft, or to deep devotion to their God, or to a pathway, monks, for instance, they fuck up.
Yep.
You are going to fuck up. The point is not to be perfect. The point is to just do it.
Yep. It's to show up, really.
Yep.
There's a saying in meditation circles about the point is not to do it right. The point is to sit the practice.
Right.
Right. The point is to just do it. You're not going to do it well every time. In fact, you're not going to do it well half the time. Sometimes it depends. But
it's worth pointing out that Siddhartha Gautama himself hit enlightenment and then fucked up afterwards. Like, he was a flesh and blood person. Like, he had vices. He had shit. Like, he spent the first 20, 30 years of his life completely ignorant that there was a thing like death.
Yeah.
I mean, the dude was fucked up.
Yeah. Came to a good spot, but
but like that's a large part of where I'm coming out of with a lot of this basic stuff is like, do the stuff you can do and don't worry about the rest. Like, if you really want to learn how to do spirit work, you really got to start here.
Yeah.
Like, if for some reason you're being called to a particular religious or magical practice, that's great. There's still basic steps you need to take to do that well.
No, I'm in full agreement. And I would say that stuff like cleansing, grounding, and shielding, it can be very simple. And for example, a number of people I know are really not energy sensitive at all, right? They might be able to move a lot of energy, but they couldn't tell you whether they're doing it or not.
Right.
So for them, it's often difficult to, am I doing it right? Is often the question. And so a lot of times I'm like, okay, cool. Use an external aid. How do you cleanse externally? It can be as simple as light a few matches and circle your head or your body a sacred number of times. I do 7 or 9 personally when I do it that way, because those numbers work well for me. It could be 3. It could be 1. One doesn't feel like enough to me, but like 3 times isn't super hard.
I think too, like, if you have an idea of what you're aiming for with, I want to get to this place with my practice, that's great, but it's not necessary to start.
Yeah.
Like, when people first come into paganism, they're asking me like, well, you've done all this wonderful stuff. Like, okay, but you got to understand how much work the basics factor into that, because if I'm not grounded, I'm not centered, I'm not cleansed, I'm not shielded, I open myself up to so much bullshit just doing the work.
Actually, I like
that's
this.
a really good one. Yeah.
Offering schedules change based on life. When you are building the relationship, who wants to try to be friends with someone who makes no time for them? More flexibility comes afterwards.
Yes.
Very much agree.
Yes.
And a lot of it, we're fighting over the mouse as per usual.
After the connection is established.
Yeah. I definitely agree. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be elaborate. Honestly, to start off with, it really shouldn't. It really shouldn't.
If you need that kind of pomp and circumstance and pageantry, that's fine. Like, go on with your bad self. I understand. I'm a former theater kid.
And ceremonial magician.
And Catholic. Yeah. I like my ritual tools quite a lot. And if the pageantry is something that you actually need as part of your practice to feel connected, fucking do it. But you don't have to have a procession every time you want to have time with the gods, or ancestors or spirits.
No, my daily offerings, the prayers take 5 minutes.
Right.
And most of that time is just saying the names of the people that I'm offering to.
So in my case, actually, so when I'm taking my daughter to the bus, we'll do a morning prayer to Suna and Dag, and then we'll do a Sigdrifus prayer as a devotional, and then she gets on the bus, and that's like not even 2 to 5 minutes long.
Yeah.
Like when I say it can literally just be a quick prayer, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like it's something that my 7-year-old can follow along with. Every night, or most every night, we do night prayers, and that takes about 1 to 5 minutes, depending on how much she wants to mess around beforehand. Because, like Daddy, she has ADHD and just focuses what? Who? But I mean, the thing of it is that your basics should be something that a kid could follow.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that as a put down. I mean that as a practical matter of keeping you sane.
Yeah, because if it takes all of your focus to do the basics every single day,
you'll burn out.
You'll burn out so fast. I remember when we first met, you were doing a half hour plus of your spiritual hygiene every fucking day. Yeah, you were very busy and you were doing a lot. And I think you did have need of most of that. But I remember when you cut it down because you were burning out from doing that much.
Yeah, I went from a 30-minute spiritual hygiene working down to 5.
Yeah.
Like I broke it down from all the gods and spirits that had anything to do with each step, because it was exceptionally elaborate. And at the time I needed that. And when I started cutting back on everything, that was one of the things I had to go to.
Yeah.
So like you're going to go through times in your life where doing anything more than just saying hi is going to be taxing.
Yeah.
I literally just got out of the hospital. I had to ask for help with my spiritual hygiene while I was in the hospital because my partner is fucking awesome. And sometimes, you're just holding down the fort and that's enough.
Yeah, no, 100%. And you're out of the hospital and I did a big cleanse for y'all today.
Right.
Shit happens. Like asking for help with it is not a bad thing.
Right. And it might seem like, oh, well, I can't do this on my own. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. That's not the point. Part of the point of building relationships with other people in the community is so that they can come in and spot you for that kind of shit.
100%. And it's not like you haven't fucking cleansed and grounded my ass into the dirt before.
I mean,
oh
God, this coffee's really good.
It is. I'm really, yes, proud of you for asking for help, says Melkor. Also, appreciates our drip today, which,
I appreciate that. Our
that it's like
all complimentary.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's actually, honestly, that's another basic thing you can do. Like most of the shirts that I wear for the show are some kind of devotional.
Yeah.
Like we pick on the Mormons for having sacred underwear, but I wear fucking t-shirts in a devotional sense. So I'm not going to pick on them for that.
Yeah.
There's plenty of theology I can pick on them for.
Yeah. No kidding. Well, and like the hats that we're wearing, like this hat, I put it on for basically all spirit work at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And what is it? It's built-in connection points. It's built-in shielding points. Covering the crown of the head is important in so many religions because it keeps you safe and pure in a lot of ways.
Mine has this is a pillbox hat, and on the inside is green linen. On the outside is wool. Not only does this damn thing keep my head warm and safe throughout pretty much any weather I could ask, it wicks away moisture and it makes it so that even if I'm sweating under it, which I am right now because I'm hot-bodied, it still is a filtration, shielding, concentration device that the spirits I want to tune into get my attention.
Yep.
So basics can also be the jewelry you wear, the stuff you wear on your head, on your body, the things that you put in your pockets. Preppers make a big deal of talking about everyday carry objects. You can break that down to where you just literally have devotional stuff on your keychain.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things that I was going to mention, like a good, easy way to ground is, and I'm going to say this knowing that crystals is a whole thing. I've got a whole rant on it on my blog, but like having a stone, even if it's a piece of granite out of your backyard or out of your driveway, that you have a good relationship with, especially if
case in point, this literally came out of our driveway. I fucking love this stone. I carry it everywhere.
Yeah, right. Grounding with that is going to be very good, especially if you have the relationship with land spirits and that stone in particular to back that shit up.
Right.
Right. It's going to be really good for that. Cleansing. Go take a fucking shower.
Literally, like some of my most intense cleansing practices involve taking a shower. I've actually done a really interesting variation on this. It's a traditional folk practice with German beer cleansing, where you pour
like a beer shower,
literally a beer shower, where
okay.
you're in the shower and you crack a cold one and you pour it over your head and it takes all the shit away.
That tracks. Yeah, no, I can see that for sure.
And you can get really fancy with it, like depending on how dark the brew is. Maybe it takes away this, that, or the other better. But like as a basic cleansing practice, if you've got some beer laying around and you're not going to drink it, cracking it over your head, not literally cracking it over your head, mind you.
Please do not
smash the bottle over your fucking skull.
But cracking it open and pouring it over your head would probably
work. Very cleansing.
Yeah.
Beer has a very long history of being made into an offering, cleanse, a whole host of stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So, but if you're alcoholic, there's all kinds of stuff like apple cider vinegar, for instance, straight up vinegar, just plain ass water with soap.
Plain ass water with soap. Vodka. Again, if you're an alcoholic, obviously that's not great, but like, yeah. Cracking a homie with the cold ones. Jesus. Yeah.
Not Jesus.
Not Jesus. Look, it's a reflex at this point. I live in America. Goddamn.
But yeah, there's tons of ways that you can tailor your practice to something that you can keep up with. And, we're in troubled economic times, and maybe a beer a week for cleansing isn't a thing you can do. Fine. So, God.
Non-ass water also works, says Emily Streaking Fate. Yeah. Please don't use ass water for that. That would not be good. That would be actually the opposite of cleansing. Right.
So the thing with the basics and foundations is these need to be able to be integrated into your everyday life. Like at the end of the day, you need to be able to put these somewhere.
Yeah.
Even if it's once a week, once a day. If you come out of work and you are fucking exhausted, there are things I would suggest for that. If you go into work and you're full of dread, the spiritual hygiene can help you deal with the stress of having to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say personally, I would recommend folks have a once a day cleansing and grounding. My genuine recommendation is build shielding in until it is either a reflex you do automatically or it's built into like objects that you wear literally every single day or both.
Right.
Which is to say, I think you should do it every day as well, but also it should be a thing that you're doing kind of unconsciously at a certain point.
Yeah. Cleansing can literally just be cleaning things. And this is actually something Melkor points out. First off, that's what bidets are for. Yeah. Non-ass water. Yeah. But you can also build it into laundry. I got a whole setup for my bedding.
Yes.
Right. So literally you could just throw some salt or a cleansing agent of some kind, or literally just use OxyClean or something.
No.
Whatever your detergent is, you can literally just ask the detergent to clean spiritually as well as physically. You don't have to get very complex with it. And again, especially if you're just starting off, I don't recommend going complex with it.
Yeah. No, I would very much agree. I would say, once a day at least, depending on your needs.
At minimum once a week, especially if you're brand new. You don't want to overload yourself. Once a week to start, and then increasing the number of days as you can.
Yeah. And I recommend this not because like, oh, you need to be, no, it's because it's good for you. It's kind of like exercise.
I literally call it part of my activities of daily living.
Yeah.
I work in the psych field, and ADLs are some of the biggest things for folks who are going through it to hit, because it immediately helps improve a lot of factors for recovery, for care, everything. So if you incorporate this on an everyday level, you're enhancing your ability to get through your day. And it's again, 2 to 5 minutes a day.
Yep. Like Emily says, like brushing your teeth.
Which I suck at, by the way.
Yeah.
because
ADHD. It's a motherfucker. Yeah. And that's the thing. And that's the thing too, right? Both of us sitting here have sometimes debilitating ADHD. Like,
how many times did I walk into the kitchen, ask you what the hell I was in there for, and neither one of us could tell?
And that was just today, at least 4 times today.
Right.
I have been over at your house for 6 hours. That's almost once an hour.
Pretty much. Right. So, like, if you are some flavor of neurodivergent, if you are even if you're not neurodivergent, have patience with yourself. It's hard. I get it. As somebody that, like, holds themselves to a high standard, I do understand, but it's also called the basics for a reason. Like, it is foundational to your practice. It's foundational to being a healthy person.
Yeah. And honestly, I would say if you can do nothing, like if you can do, advanced energy work stuff and pull, do shielding, this, that, and the other, cool, great, do that. I think genuinely, some of my favorite advice to give is to externalize things whenever possible, right? Ground by holding a rock and pouring all of the energy, including emotional energy that you don't need right now.
Like, if you can't feel energy, just squeeze the shit out of the rock. You're fine.
Yeah. Cleanse with an object, fire, with smoke, with water, to, take a shower. Shield by putting on sacred jewelry or build it in your clothes, right? Literally, I am shielding by putting on the shirt.
You can literally, like, on lined paper, you can draw shields all over the paper, or just a really big fucking shield, fold it up, put it in your pocket. That is a very basic enchantment. Writing itself, we call it spelling for a reason. And I know that's a jokey, folky etymology.
I was going to say, you've got it backwards. The spelling took it from spells, as like magic took it from spelling, because words are magic. But words are magic all over the world. They always have been, right? Everywhere in the world, speaking things is magic, speaking things into existence. The runes, there is the...
That's a whole other...
It is. And like, I believe in the runes as spirits unto themselves and things that are magic outside of just being letters.
Absolutely.
But the runes are also
writing.
They're fucking letters.
Right.
And there is an entire academic, like, it's not the consensus, but there is an academic understanding that when they're talking about the runes as magic, they literally just mean the ability to fucking write things down as a magic power. Why? Because you can pass information across thousands of years by writing it down.
And how many of the people were actually literate at the time?
Very
few. So when you're talking about, like, they just carved comb into a comb. Yes. They identified it. They gave it a name. It's theirs.
Yeah. You know how many people could do that? Not many.
Not many. That's a flex.
Yeah.
And the fun part is that as the literacy rate grows, like, it becomes much more mundane. But when you really, like, sit to think about the span of human history in which pretty much only the rich fucks got to spell anything.
No. Well, and if you think about, there's actually, so in Stephen King's half writing advice book and half memoirs, on writing is, I believe, the title. The very first thing he does in the book is intro you to basically, like, writing is magic. Here, let me show you. And he goes through some examples of, like, here, look at, and he, like, describes a situation in very bare bones. And then he tells you, this is probably what you were thinking. How do I know that? Even though I didn't say it before, because we're in the same culture and you probably thought of that thing. Also, you are reading my words and thoughts, and we have never met. This is fucking magic. I am sending thoughts to you across space and time.
Right.
This is telepathy just through a physical medium.
Right. And so with a lot of these foundational things, it literally can be just writing something down. I am grounding. It can literally say, so in my Heathen Mouth Magic course, workshop rather, one of the things I have people do is they are literally repeating phrases like, I am grounded. I am centered. I am concentrating on blah.
Yeah.
Like, that's literally magic, because you're putting your effort of your body, your mouth, there's so many souls that are doing work when you speak something into existence that on its own, it's an excellent magical practice. The trick is that once you start getting good at that, then you got to watch what comes out of your mouth.
Yeah, then it becomes very easy to accidentally speak things.
And I am saying this as an example. This is not something I'm casting into the world. If I say, I hate that motherfucker and I want them to die, I have to be exceptionally careful. One, that I don't mean that. Two, that the spirits I have relationships with don't take that to mean go kill this motherfucker.
Yeah. 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 You get a lot of stories coming out of, for example, Mongolia, of shamans being like, I have to be very careful maintaining how I phrase things and keeping their emotions in check, because the spirits around them will take those emotions as cues to go fucking do things.
I've had situations where I didn't realize the runes were listening when I said something and went, whoops, because you can't unsay shit. You cannot unring a bell once you've rung it.
Yeah.
So with a lot of these basics, because you're building up spiritual practice, you're building up spiritual stores of energy, you're doing a lot. Like, just by saying, I want to do the basics, you already set yourself up with a lot of potentiality for really going places in terms of powerful magic, powerful spiritual relationships, the whole kit and caboodle. You also have the potentiality for it to go absolutely nowhere, either because you're not taking the time to do it, or because you're going too fast and you don't have the groundwork to build off of.
Yeah. And that's a thing, bouncing off that. And we've kind of gone over this already, but so much of advanced stuff, big rituals and things like that, are built on the basics.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, if you show up to a big ritual and you can't ground and you don't have any way to do so, if you don't have any way to regulate energy either up or down, how are you going to bring energy into the ritual if you can't move it up?
Right.
How are you going to show up for a big worship ritual and do things, be accepted by the spirits in the thing, if you're walking in covered in spiritual mud?
Right. And moreover to the point, this is where we get into sometimes some sticky situations, because sometimes you get ritual facilitators. I have done this, so I'm not just picking on people, where I assume everybody's on the same fucking page, spiritually speaking, as to cleansing, grounding, centering, and shielding. And I don't do this anymore, but when I was very new to the religion, I would not always check in that everybody knew what the fuck I meant. And sometimes I'd do ritual, and a lot of these people would not be grounded, not be cleansed, not be shielded, not be anything. They would just be walking into a ritual space and going, light me up.
And especially you go to like a conference like Convo, people have been to 4 rituals that day and haven't done any grounding in between and haven't had a bite of food.
Right.
And then they walk into your ritual and it's like, wow, you are on fire. I do not mean that positively. What is happening?
Right. So a lot of the basics are about keeping yourself safe and keeping others safe, because uncontrolled magical potential just spilling out everywhere is honestly not a lot different than radiation of various kinds, whether electromagnetic or otherwise. Like, you can make somebody's Geiger counter, spiritually speaking, tick a lot by not taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
And it can be exceptionally distracting in a ritual where you're trying to focus. So at minimum, you can have a negative impact by impeding the ability of the ritual or the occurrence to go off correctly. At worst, you can completely bungle the ritual because you're not in the right headspace to be doing it. And this goes for ritualists and people who are showing up to a ritual to be participants.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been part of many a ritual, having facilitated one where I wasn't very grounded and I had to get my shit unlocked because I needed to show up for other people. Yep. So this is not me saying, oh, you're just a terrible practitioner if you don't do these things. Like I said at the beginning of the show, everybody fucks up.
Absolutely. I have walked into situations and been like, oh, I was not ready for that. Not that like I couldn't handle it, but I was like, oh, I did not do any of the prep work I needed to do. Oh, shit. Hang on. Give me 30 seconds.
And a competent ritualist, and I say this as a competent ritualist, will actually plan for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is part of the gig of putting on a ritual, especially in a conference atmosphere. Ideally, you have a full-on ground crew that can help people with the basics, especially because you can't assume everybody knows everything. Even if you slap "this is an advanced ritual" on your notice, people who've never experienced a ritual in this setting are going to come in.
Yeah.
You must account for that. So when it comes to the basics, part of why we harp on it so much, not just because, well, this is how you keep people safe and sane. This is also how you keep things tidy. Like in your own life as well as others. Because if you're walking into a death and rebirth ritual and you've never so much as thought about dying, you're going to get fucked up.
It might still work.
It might still work. It might actually work more deeply than what you think it will, especially if you've never explored the concept of death. If you've been afraid of death all your life and you have baggage with that, that may come out in ways that you never expected, but you'll be better prepared for it if you've done the basics before showing up. Yeah. Incidentally, I don't recommend you show up to a death and rebirth ritual without having thought of death. I don't recommend that.
No? Are you sure?
I mean, you do you. But it's a question of how much the ritualist or grounding team is going to have to do to put you back together. Because if your mind is completely blown and this wasn't supposed to be a mind-blowing ritual, that you can produce problems for the ritual crew that you didn't mean to introduce.
Yeah.
So this is partly a personal responsibility thing, and it's also a communal responsibility thing.
Yeah. No, and I've seen that happen. I was part of ground crew for a pretty serious ritual that was in no fashion possessory. It was just a
straight up
ritual energy. It was a big working, but it was all energy. Like spirits were evoked, but not invoked. I think I'm using those correctly.
Evoke is to call out to from within.
Yeah.
Invoke is to bring it into you.
Yeah. So spirits were evoked, but not invoked. And someone didn't do their
due diligence.
And later that night, we had to do a whole ass exorcism. That was rough. You were there.
Was I?
Yeah. It was after it was at Convo.
Oh. I don't really remember.
That's right. You never remember Convo. It was the first Convo. It was my first Convo.
Oh, it was your first Convo? I definitely didn't remember that weekend because I was working the whole time.
Yeah. No. And that's part of why is because you helped me and some other folks do a whole ass exorcism.
Okay.
It was
that tracks.
Yeah, it was not super fun to have someone who should have known better not do their work and not be shielded and grounded correctly, and a spirit just popped into them because they were open.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd just done a big ritual.
This is a really good point here too.
Yeah.
Some folks see advanced ritual as a personal challenge.
It's not. It never is.
It's not.
It never is.
Please don't fucking do that.
Yeah.
Like if you don't belong there and you know you don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't fucking do it. Like this is the other part of the basics where, you know, if you've been doing this for several weeks or months, like even if it's once a week, by the time you get to a convention setting or like something like Ann Arbor Pagan Pride, you should have some idea of what you can and cannot handle after a couple of weeks or months of doing this.
Yeah.
And if you don't know,
ask.
Please fuck ask.
I would rather somebody say, hey, I'm not sure if I should be here. And then I can play 20 questions with them and I can determine whether or not they should be there.
Right.
Versus, and you know, bare minimum, I can be like, cool, I'm going to do some fucking divination on whether or not you should be in this room.
Right. And the thing is, again, it doesn't have to be a huge, big thing. The point of doing this work daily or weekly is to build up spiritual muscles and experience so that you know it's just like hitting the gym. I know starting off, I should not start with 50-pound weights on my arms. I should be humble and maybe start at 5 or 10 because that's what I know I can handle. And then I can build from there.
Yeah. It is much easier to go up than it is to start high and hurt yourself.
Right.
And I say that from experience. One of my very first lessons, I hurt myself. My teacher at the time was talking about energy and sources of energy and this, that, and the other. And I tried to just look at too much at once. And I went, ow, because I felt a twinge painfully right in the middle of my skull. The teacher was like, what the fuck did you just do? And it took me a week to heal from that. Right. Doing basically nothing.
Yeah, the thing is, if you're doing this, in a sense, taking the gym analogy, if you're training to failure, that's fine. If you're trying to bulk, for instance, that's one way to do it. If you've got mobility issues starting off, probably not ideal.
Yeah. And if you're training to failure, that's for a specific reason. You're doing a specific thing. You should
have somebody spotting for you.
You should have somebody spotting for you, and that's not a thing that you do all the time. That's not an every.
No.
Right? That's something that
like weight trainers do that to bulk up and get ready for competition. There is a difference between somebody who's establishing relationships with spirits versus somebody who's spiritually bulking to prepare for a big ritual.
Right. My prep work for a big initiation I went through was intense work, basically journey work every single night for months.
Right.
And I told you about that, and you're like, "Are you okay? Are you sure?"
Right.
That was you were rightfully concerned for me.
I was, and you did the smart thing, and you got divination from at least 3 people.
Yep.
Okay. Whoops. From the whoops, I became a spirit worker. It's good to keep in mind that you might be yoinked into something if you're unprepared in a ritual.
Yes.
Yes. And this is where I say the basics matter depending on who you are, where you're at, and how you're coming into things.
Yeah. And that's another thing too, is it's nice to be able to, and on the kind of the opposite end of being okay asking for help, walking into a ritual already grounded, already with your basics under your belt, knowing no one's going to have to help me. I'm not going to be a liability. And if it's out of your control, there's nothing wrong with being a liability if it's out of your control. But if you walk into an advanced ritual knowing I'm super out of it today, don't go.
Right.
Walk in knowing that no one's going to have to pick your ass up off the floor.
There were a number of workshops that I wanted to go to that I chose not to this last con because either I was recovering from rituals I was participating in, or I was resting in lieu of preparing for them.
Yeah.
Because, could I have gone to the workshop before the ancestor ritual that I did with Emily? Yeah. Would it have been smart? Fuck no.
No. Also, speaking of Emily,
this is a good one.
Training to failure is not the same as training to injury. You need to know the difference. Absolutely.
And this is where having people in the community you can trust to ask, hey, is this too much?
Yeah.
I just started. Is excellent.
Yeah.
This is also where a lot of responsibility falls on elders and people who are trusted in the community. This is where a lot of responsibility falls on your shoulders to not only do your own fucking basic work, but to be sure that you're the right person to be teaching or talking with this person, and having the humility and the wherewithal to pass them on to somebody else if you're not the one.
Yep. And that's another good point too, is I would rather have someone who knows nothing but the basics walk into a ritual who does those basics every single day. I would rather have that person in a ritual than someone who knows everything and never does it.
Yep. Armchair magicians are a problem. Because
are.
If you don't put your theory into practice, you don't know what works.
Yeah.
Now you can have all the theory and be really well read, but if you've never so much as drawn a triangle of art, you shouldn't be doing rituals that involve that thing.
Yeah. And I can always be like, hey, you know exactly what you're doing with the basics. Here is a task. Do that specific task. We can work on other things later.
I take a lot of the same tack when people come to me for training.
Yeah.
The thing of meeting somebody where they're at, like the basics when you're talking about a teacher, they need to be able to produce who they've studied under, if anybody. They need to be exceptionally honest if they're mostly spirit taught. And if they have some kind of lineage, they need to be able to provide references. The other thing that they need to be doing is, especially if you're doing the basics with somebody and you're just starting out, ask around the community, because this person might be taking advantage or they might not be known at all. Yep. They might just be putting out a shingle to make a couple extra bucks.
Yep.
This is a big problem in TikTok right now.
Yep. Also, if you're going to train to failure, your spotter needs to know that informed support is important.
Yep.
Yes,
yep.
Dear gods, yes.
I cannot tell you how many people have come up to me in various situations. I just went through this ritual and ...
Yep. Well, and this is a thing that both of us have done, was not talk to our ground crew enough.
Yep.
I have been the ground crew that you didn't talk to enough,
yep.
and I was angry with you about it.
Which is legit.
And
vice versa.
Yeah, and vice versa. Like, very clearly we're past it, but like, no, that was a
wrong-headed move.
Hey, I needed to know that.
Yeah.
And I've done that with other. Oh yeah, thanks. I've done that with other people too, where like, and on the flip side, as ground crew, somebody was doing some possessory work and they were pretty new to it, and because I'm pretty used to being ground crew for possessory work, stares at you directly. Immediately went into my normal. All right, we're done with the possession. Here's all of the things that I'm going to do, except I didn't talk about it. I just started doing it. And they were like, what the fuck are you doing? What is happening? And I'm like, oh, right, you're new to this. Here is everything I am doing. Here is why. Oh, okay, that's actually really nice. Next time, tell me. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot that you didn't know this.
If you're trained to failure, your spotter needs to know that informed support is important. It needs to be on both sides of it. Because if what advice you're asking me is actually how can I safely train to failure versus I just want to have a practice that builds endurance, these are two separate questions. I need to know that, and I need to have the expertise to be able to teach both those methods if that is something that I am putting my shingle out for.
Yeah.
And even if I'm not putting out my shingle, if somebody comes to me for advice, I need to have the wherewithal to say, I can't advise you in this.
Yeah.
This is not my insert practice here.
Yeah.
Like, don't come to me for voodoo. I will happily refer you to other people.
Yep.
Because I am not the one.
Mm-hmm.
Also, my dance card's fucking full. I don't need more shit. And I mean that with deep, deep love and respect to the Loa who have come into my life. But as of right now, I am not seeking to do any of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah.
So this is why having people who know different things about basics and foundations, because a Vodasant is probably going to have different practices, and an Ifa priest is probably going to have different practices than a Kemetic, than a Norse heathen, than a et cetera, et cetera. The best part of my practice is being the I know a guy friend. Yes.
100%.
Like, networking is such a huge part of the basics and foundations.
Yeah. Being the, oh, you got this kind of spirit problem. No, I know a guy. Let's go talk to them. Melkor actually being a person that I would routinely throw people out for a couple of different things.
And them knowing that you're going to do that is huge too.
It is.
Because just saying, hey, email this person out of the fucking blue with no handshake is one of the worst screeching halts I've ever experienced personally, because somebody referred me out, never informed me, and I'm like, who the fuck are you?
No, my favorite thing that I do all the time is I will introduce people over Discord. I will, because I'm friends with both of them, set up a group chat. Hi, this person, meet this person. This person, meet this person. I'm leaving. And then bounce before either of them have a chance to say anything.
Right.
And just like, cool, you have been handshook. Goodbye. This is not my business.
Right. And again, when it comes to foundations of practice, this is why relationships are so fucking important.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't have context, the relationship doesn't have context. If you don't have, this is the direction I'm aiming, or this is what I would like to see or do, or etc. If you don't have any idea of how you want this practice to go, that's fine, but you need to be able to glom onto something.
Well, and that would actually be my first piece of advice. If you don't know which way you want your practice to go, think that shit through.
Please think that shit through.
Like, don't just start doing stuff. Like, what are you looking for?
Dabbling is dangerous for this reason, because if somebody dabbles in ceremonial magic and they summon something they don't know how to get rid of, that is a pain in the ass for literally everybody else in your community.
Yeah.
Not only you.
And it will be a pain in the
ass for you.
Like, that will suck for you. Also, somebody's going to have to fix your shit, and that's not going to be fun.
Like, if you're just sitting there reading shit out of the Clavicula Solomonus, which I do not fucking recommend, you are going to need to seriously think before you embark. Read, talk. There are shitloads of podcasts out there. Hi, Around Grandfather Fire, and 2 of them.
Right.
So, like, there's literally thousands of hours worth of content that if you are interested in something, some niche, something particular, you will find it. You partly got to know what you're looking for and why you're looking for it.
Yeah. And if you're on our Discord, which you should join our Discord, it's fun. We're not super active, but like it's a decent time.
It's a good time.
Like fucking ask a question. We've got a whole channel dedicated to questions. Ask us a question. We will, if we don't know the answer, we will find someone who does.
Fuck it, show up in the live and throw a question there. That's fine too.
Yeah, like fucking, you got a question right now. Sure,
right.
Pull the trigger. Like,
so the thing with a lot of the basics and foundations is not only that they build on each other, but some of them are actually mutually exclusive.
Yeah,
like you can't do a cleansing, and it will take the place of a grounding. They're at cross purposes, because if I'm cleansing with Ansus, I'm not grounding with it in that moment.
Yeah.
Like, could you ground with Ansus? Yes. I don't find it as effective as grounding with Gabo.
No, that's fair.
Partly because of the associations I've built up in my spiritual practice around that. Now, if you, for some reason, find that Ansus really grounds you out and Gabo really cleanses you, that's fine. That's a difference of practice. But you have to know some of what you're doing before that becomes a thing.
Yeah.
So, again, a lot of these basics and these foundations play into and across from each other. Even if never the twain shall meet, they're co-creating.
Yeah, very much. And it's funny you say, because for me, grounding and cleansing are tied together really deeply. So I'm like, no, I do grounding and cleansing together all the time, but that's because my particular relationships and the way that I'm wired, I can do that.
Right.
You don't. And that's another part of this, is kind of figuring out what does and doesn't work for you.
Especially in a ritual setting, having neat and tidy categories is very, very helpful, especially if you're trying to get everybody on the same page.
Oh, for sure. No, and it is important. I would rather split things up to minutia that, right, there's degrees to it, right? If you spend the entire ritual just doing definitions, you're not doing a ritual anymore. But at least having enough of a basic definition, enough of a glossary that you're on the same page and can do the thing. Yeah, if I can do that. Just because I personally know that when I ground, I'm also going to be cleansing at the same time. Neat, but I know that I'm doing that and we can still talk.
Right. So again, basics depends on context. Foundations depend on context. And if you're taking a very baseline approach with polytheism is that gods exist, are real, and are worthy of worship, or animism, that spirits are real and worthy of having relationships with, that means an entire field of possibility. And thinking about what kind of relationships you want with what kinds of spirits is really important, especially before you roll up and go, I want to get to know the Fae, for instance. The basics of around how to safely develop a relationship with the Fae are going to be very different than developing relationships with your ancestors. By dint of, there's folklore, there's current practice, there's entire fields of study on just dissecting old Irish manuscripts on this particular thing, or there's this particular bit of folklore from this particular isle, or et cetera, et cetera. You can get really fucking minute with it. And the thing of it is that the basics kind of shifts depending on what particular direction you're talking about. Because general pagan basics are like cleansing, grounding, centering, shielding, devotional work, and relationship building. Like if you really want to like bury it down to its absolute essence, that's where a lot of people find the core of practice. Once you get out of that, that's when a lot of the minutia starts to really make a difference, because I don't hold that kind of relationship with the Fae. I actively try to, as many people as I know who are involved ass deep with the Fae, I do my level best to just nod in their general direction and go, I'm good.
Yeah. You try real hard. It doesn't work, but you try real hard.
I try. But again, like the basics of developing a relationship with the Fae or the Alfar or whomever varies greatly depending on the community you're part of and the perspective you're engaged with, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, and it's, these groups of spirits have different social mores that are going to affect how you can and cannot develop a relationship with them, right? Ancestors have different social mores, especially depending on the culture that they came from, than the good neighbors do. Why? Because these are different groups of people.
Yeah. The foundation of how you understand what constitutes an ancestor versus just a dead person you're related to also matters.
Yes.
Like these are foundational questions you need to know some kind of answer to before you engage, because if you're assuming that all ancestors are just blood ancestors and you get some really weird fucking dreams and they're like, we're related and they're an animal, you'll need to tweak your worldview, or you may need to investigate deeper into the particulars of the religion you're studying.
Yeah. Because in some ancestors will show up in the form of animals, and they're not the animal, they're just showing up in that shape.
Because you'll pay attention to it.
Yep. Yeah, for a variety of reasons. Yeah, there's all kinds of things. Another thing that we haven't talked about yet, even though we've kind of talked around it, is another piece of this, and why also developing relationships is good and important, is asking spirits to do stuff for you.
Right. It can't all just be a one-sided deal.
Yeah, right? Like, if I need help cleansing, I'm going to Lupa.
Right.
Why? She's good at it, and it's part of our relationship, right? That's a thing. So the train of thought just died. I'm so sorry.
It's cool. I'll pick it up at this point.
Yeah.
So the thing with asking spirits for help is it needs to be informed consent on both sides. It needs to be a spirit you have a decent relationship with. Partly because you could end up owing more than you get out of the relationship if it's a spirit you've never talked with before and you're asking them to help you.
Yes.
Because debt's a thing, and several spirits have different ways that they will collect debts. Make sure this is a spirit you want to owe.
Yep.
On the flip side, some spirits will get really offended if you constantly just make offerings or do favors for them and never reciprocate with asking for something from them.
Yeah.
This can offend a lot of different kinds of spirits depending on who you're talking with. One of the basics that I lay out in my Digging the Dvergar workshop, where it's talking about dwarves and developing relationships with them, is you actually need to complete the cycle of gift giving. And you actually do need to ask them for things and not just make offerings. I've done that, and I had a sit down talk with one of the dwarves I'm especially close to, and he's like, look, we understand the respect in which it's given, but you're not giving us a chance to help you out, and that's not okay.
Yeah. It's in much the same way that, like, I do not like being in a lot of debt to someone, either financially or otherwise. I like being able to pay that back because it doesn't feel great to just owe someone a bunch.
Right.
Spirits don't like that either. If all you do is give offerings and never ask for help, you are building up debt and not doing anything with it.
Right. The gifting cycle needs to be complete.
It's a cycle. It's a relationship.
And at different times, it's going to be different levels of we owe each other or whatever. Some spirits are going to be really formal about it, and some spirits aren't. They'll be like, just call me when you need a hand.
Yeah. And largely, I don't find it to be a thing.
It's not necessarily transactional.
No.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. And I largely do not experience it to be a thing of like a checkbook or right. It's debt, yes, but it's not like numbers. Oh, I've given you 7 offerings, therefore I must ask for a favor of this size. No, it's been a few months. I've just been giving offerings, and I've been giving steady offerings every day for a couple of months. Hey, I really need a favor. Can you help?
Right. Really quick. Yeah. Melkor, me beefing with my ancestors. I'll put you all back in the box. Don't test me.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, right? Two-way street relationships. If it's not working and they're not holding up their end, all right, well, you don't get offerings anymore. Why? Because you're not helping me.
All right. If you want to be a douche canoe, that's great. You can be a douche canoe back in Helheim.
Yeah. Like, cool. Not going to talk to you anymore. Not going to give you offerings. Why? You're not holding up your end.
The other thing I think to tackle with regards to the basics and foundations is, are you approaching what spirit are you, pardon the play on words, what spirit are you approaching these relationships in? If you are purely as a servant, that's not bad, but your basic needs for foundational and basic practice will be different from somebody approaching this from a perspective of, I'm here to gather power, or I'm here to build a community.
No.
Like, so figuring out what kinds of roles you're most comfortable with versus what the spirits will accept or want is also something that, again, and if you're just fresh new to this, getting divination on this is very, very, very important.
Yeah.
Because the last thing you want to do is follow somebody else's lead, and it's supposed to be just for them.
Yeah.
I've had several encounters with people at conventions where they're like, wow, I really am impressed with, like, Galder, for instance. I want to be where you're at. I'm like, okay, but you got to understand how much shit is in front of that. We were talking about this earlier, and it's a good conversation to have with regards to the basics, because if you want to get to this point where you sing to this group of spirits and they are immediately responding, there is a shitload of work that goes into the basics of making that relationship useful and viable.
Yes. And Destiny says, and if you don't ask for what you want, sometimes you get surprise gifts.
Lol, so true, Matt. Destiny.
Yep. Yeah, that can be a thing, and it doesn't.
It may not come to you in a fashion that you appreciate or can use.
Yeah. And, well, that's paid.
I heard you needed help with money, so, your relative just kicked the bucket. Sorry.
Fuck. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, if you ask the ancestors for monetary help and you are not a little more specific than, I don't care where the money comes from, you might get an inheritance, but, you may not enjoy who gives it to you.
Yeah.
Or the string is attached to it.
Right. Yeah.
Or the sheer amount of bullshit it takes for you to free up like, for instance, if they had a house and now you've got to try to sell the fucking thing.
Yeah.
Congrats. It's a shitload of money that you cannot access. Technically, we did what you asked.
Yep. Oh, God. Emily says, your house burned down, so you get an insurance check for the amount. Yeah.
Yep. I have seen things like this happen.
Actually, so have I. A friend was in pretty desperate straits, and I am not taking credit for this, at least not entirely, because I don't think it's that way. But I would be lying if I said I didn't think it nudged things along. Actually, literally had their house burned down because they were in pretty desperate straits, like financially and with some other stuff. Mm-hmm. Had their house burned down, and they got much more than they were expecting. Like, went from like, I am in dire financial trouble to like, oh no, I'm set for 3 years just living off of this. I no longer have to work for the next 3 years level of cash out of it. Mm-hmm. And it was like, damn. Also, your house burned down.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's shit like that can happen.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of being very careful about who you say what to and in what setting.
Yeah.
Because you may get some responses that you weren't expecting. So with regards to building up the basics, it's knowing yourself, what ways work best for you, and trying things out and being okay with failing or experimenting with a lot more than what you think should. The should is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah.
But you will encounter this quite frequently in the community where you should be able to do a tree meditation. Again, not everybody can fucking visualize. Sometimes the tree meditation just sucks. Like, if it doesn't have enough vibrancy to dig your proverbial teeth into, some people don't get anything out of it because you're just trying to imagine a fucking tree for 20 minutes. Yeah,
I don't really dig the tree meditation. Like, I can make it work, but that's not what I'm going to go to.
Right. But the point being is that, if you know this is a thing that does not work for you, that's great. That's information you can take into a practice that you can then try.
Yeah.
Like, if the tree meditation doesn't work for you, try something else. Literally hold a fucking rock. Like, if you're trying to ground out and the tree meditation is just too much fucking work, cool. You know a method that doesn't work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least right now doesn't work for you.
Yeah. And that's valuable information because it gives you more to go on. Okay, cool. That doesn't work for me. Why doesn't it work for me?
Right. Having a mindset for experimentation is not the same thing as just bouncing from practice to practice willy-nilly with no regard for what you're actually trying to achieve.
No, because the experimentation requires analysis. It's why didn't this work?
Or not even like, maybe it worked, but not in a way I need it.
Yeah.
Like, if for some reason the tree meditation works for you, but you're too grounded, look at why.
Yeah.
Ask yourself why. And if you don't have an answer, go to somebody else and say, hey, this is my experience, and that felt weird.
Yeah. Or try again, but tweak it and see if it changes things, right? Literal experimentation.
Right. See, the basics, the basics are not meant to straitjacket you. The basics are there to enable you more freedom.
Yeah. They're literally to empower you to do more things.
Foundational practices and foundational understandings are there to enhance, not get in the way.
Yeah.
And if they are, I would question, first off, why you would stick with a practice when it's clearly not showing you the dividends that it's supposed to. But also, if you're not getting to where you, quote, supposed to be at, end quote, at the end of that experimentation phase, taking a look at what factors are going into what you're doing and how is really deeply important. And if you're not informed enough, being okay with talking with people in community is really important.
Yeah. Another thing that I had meant to talk about, but that we haven't talked about in regards to basics is intent and focus.
Yeah.
Because that's a big thing, like walking into a ritual, if you're super ungrounded and all of that, it's really hard to focus your intent well and cleanly on the task at hand. If you're so ungrounded and you can't think straight, you shouldn't be walking into a ritual. That's not a good headspace or energy space to be walking into a ritual with. You will be distracting to everyone around you energetically and muddying to the ritual.
Right. If something doesn't sound like your cup of tea, it is entirely responsible and good for you to say, not for me today.
Yeah.
And that's true of basic practice. Like if you can't summon the will to get out of bed, beating yourself up for not being able to do your spiritual hygiene is not helpful. This is, again, another part of the basics and foundation, that having some patience for yourself and others is really fucking important, because you're never going to get everything right, nor should you.
Yeah.
The point is to dust yourself off and try again.
Yep. And there's a difference between beating yourself up for lying in bed and not being able to do your basics versus using your basics as a tool to get you out of bed.
Right.
Because I've done both, where it's like self-defeating cycle of, oh, I'm so terrible, I haven't even done these basic things that I'm supposed to do. I'm a priest and I can't even make an offering today. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's not helpful.
No.
On the flip side, I'm a priest. I will at least make one basic offering today. I will get my ass out of this bed and I will do that at minimum. If I do nothing else, I will do this. Gets me out of bed. And some days that's all you can do.
Right. This is where knowing yourself is really, really important, because if you know you've got a neurodivergence that makes it very hard with, like, say, executive dysfunction, where I want to do a thing, but I can't get my brain to go and do the thing, even if it's just literally go over to the tap and get some water. Beating yourself up is going to be completely non-productive, and it's going to make you avoid doing it. So part of the basics is also being really clear with yourself of what is really actually within your scope and power to do, what must be done versus what can slide and in what context. But also, some of this stuff, until you start doing it, you're just not going to know.
Yep.
Because part of the point of developing these relationships is that it's a unique relationship with you and this other being. I mean, this is true of flesh and blood people as it is with any kind of spiritual significance.
Yep.
And I say, for the last almost hour and a half, we've been talking about this, having fucked up on every single side of this.
Literally everyone.
Right. There have been times where I've walked into a ritual completely ungrounded and somebody had to walk over and go, you look really fucked up. Maybe you should just not.
Maybe you should not. Or, hi, can I help you? You need a hand.
Right. Like any time where I'm talking about a fuck up, I have probably done it at least 3 times. At least.
Yep.
Like, what makes an expert in these communities versus somebody who is just bullshitting around is they've done the work and they continue to do the work.
Yep.
Like, honestly, when it really comes down to brass tacks, are they actually engaged in doing the work? And sometimes doing the work for them is, I got out of bed today. That's a fucking victory.
Yep.
And other days it's, I did a 20-hour ritual. I stayed up with the fucking sun. I did a bevy of offerings and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Everybody does something different at different times. you are the point is not to be like the super, like the premier spiritual person, like chop wood, carry water, before and after enlightenment.
Yep. Yeah. God, solstice vigils are so fun, but such a pain in the ass. Just, oh, you're so exhausted afterward. Fucking sleep for 2 days.
And that's the thing too. Like, if you know that you're going to be a spoon deficit after a big honking ritual, please rest.
Fucking aftercare is so important.
The priest, right? Right. Like,
you don't need to be the uber priest, the priest. You don't need to do those things. Frankly, you don't need to be a priest. Like,
right. That's the other thing too. Is like, sometimes not being a spiritual specialist allows you for degrees of freedom that your spiritual specialists just don't have.
Yep.
There are times where I've gotten my ass kicked by Odin for not getting out of bed and doing the thing, because that's what was expected of me and that's what I agreed to. And he had full right to kick me in the ass and get me out of bed and have me go do the thing at 3 a.m, because that's the thing I signed up for.
Yep. It's one of those, like, I have accidentally violated taboos that I knew I had and still was violently sick about it. Why? I signed up for that.
Right.
Like, ooh, bacon cheeseburger sure does sound great. Eat it. Oh no. That was a fun day.
I'll bet. And that, again, is like part of the basics of knowing the religion you're going into, the expectations of the community, the expectations of the god, the gods, the ancestors, and the spirits. That is actually part of the foundations of knowing, if I sign up for this job, these are the expectations. And if you don't know what the expectations are, but you want the fancy title, you need to be real fucking careful, because you could borrow a lot of goddamn trouble, and you might sign somebody else up to have to dig you out of that shit, assuming they can.
And they can't always.
They can't always. I have had situations where the gods have come to me and went like, tag. I've been that person.
Tag, you're it. Or there's no getting this person out of this. They signed that deal.
They're fucked. Right. And maybe next go around they'll have a better time of it. Good luck.
Yeah. There's a story. I didn't know the person, but a story that was floating around a group that I was in for a while, where someone had gone around making a bunch of deals, like a number of deals, where they had promised a number of very large spirits, including indigenous spirits, that they would do XYZ thing if the spirit did XYZ other thing for them. And the spirits sure showed up.
Do not renege on a deal with a spirit. That's a bad fucking idea.
The spirits sure did show up for them and fulfilled those bargains, and then they just did not hold up their end. And then their life fell to fucking pieces, and they couldn't figure out why. Why is everything going wrong for me? Why is everything so... It was like, somebody sat down and did divination with them. It was like, what the fuck did you do? You signed up for all of this. What did you do? Why aren't you doing the things that you agreed to do? Right. Oh, well, I don't feel good.
That doesn't matter.
Did you build that into the agreement? No, you didn't. You fucking signed up for this shit. That's why things are going wrong.
Right. If you say something so broad-based like, I will make an offering once a week, it does not matter to some of these spirits if you're sick. You have to make the offering, and you can't do a proxy if you haven't built it into the agreement. Some of these spirits are incredibly litigious.
Yeah.
And again, this is like knowing the basics of your religion and why it's so important. Because if you're dealing with spirits that are incredibly litigious or engage in wordplay or really just...
Even if it's very much on the spirit of the agreement and you're not meeting the spirit of that agreement and that spirit is demanding about it,
yeah, you kind of fuck yourself.
Yeah.
So again, this is why basics and foundation are important, because knowing what will be expected of you by certain spirits is just foundational to understanding what relationships in that religion look like.
Yeah.
Like, if you want a loving mother goddess who caresses you and tells you what a good poppet you are today, maybe not the Morrigan. Maybe.
I wasn't sure where you were going with that. Ellen Morgan was not certainly not it. You are 1,000% correct. Oh, yeah, that's not who I thought you were going to say. You were very right, though.
That's not to say that our gods don't have multifaceted expressions in our relationships with them, and that the Morrigan is bereft of the ability to be motherly. But she is absolutely not the first or the last being that I think of when it comes to warm, cuddly mother type.
Yeah.
Whatsoever. If you are looking for that kind of relationship, she's not probably the direction you should be looking at.
Yeah. And if she is,
and I say this as a non-priest, as somebody who like says, I'm over here, you're over there, we're good.
Yeah.
Much respect. But
I do have a relationship with Anne Morgan, and I would say like she can be extremely loving and caring. If someone gets a very cuddly, warm vibe from her, I would question if they're talking to the right person. But good for them. But most people aren't going to get that. Like every relationship is different.
However,
there
are hallmarks to our gods for a reason.
Yeah.
Likewise, if every ancestor that you're speaking with is nothing but overly warm and positive, I have to ask if you're talking to sock puppets or if you're talking to something that just wants to get energy from you.
Yeah.
If you have Christians in your family who are ancestors, some of them will not work with you if you are a pagan.
Yeah.
I have lost connection with ancestors because I became a polytheist.
Mm-hmm.
Because I walked away from the church as an apostate, I have certain ancestors that will never speak to me again. I made that choice fully reckoning that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, being married, I get a different side of Angerbotha than most people get. That's not super surprising. That makes sense in the context of the relationship.
However,
I can still look at her and still see that same face that a lot of people get.
Right.
The
ferocious wolf, wild woman of the woods, which is what a lot of people get when you hear the word Angerbotha. Anger bearer.
Mm-hmm.
She's going to bear the anger, and you just don't want to be in the fucking path.
Yeah.
So, like, again, a lot of the basics and the foundational stuff that you do in terms of investigating, is this religion going to work with me? Am I going to work in this religion? Does this particular religion have any oaths that I need to be mindful of? If so, what? What taboos am I taking on based on what community roles I want to look at? Do I want a community role at all, or do I just want to be part? All of these are valid questions.
Or do you want to be in the path? Oh, about Angerbotha. Or do you want to be in the path?
Right.
I mean,
it's you. I don't.
You sure don't. Sometimes it's fun.
The thing with understanding like the basics of the religion that you're engaged with, that you're engaging in, that you're choosing to be part of, you in some ways are eliminating other pathways from being viable for you.
Yep.
If you're going to be a polytheist, monotheism basically shuts its doors.
Yep.
It's not to say that you cannot work with or worship Yahweh in regards to a polytheist perspective, because not only is that manifestly just not true, but I've known folks in religious groups that are ethnically Jewish that are also polytheist, and they're fucking cool people.
Yep.
Now, that being said, I know from my experience with the church, certain of those relationships transformed greatly from what they were when I was a Catholic. And I made the choices I did knowing that, as an informed Catholic when I made that choice. And so when you're taking on a new spiritual role, or a spiritual role period for the first time, like if you come out of an atheist background, investigating and figuring out where you feel like you fit is a completely legitimate thing to do. And if trying to believe in gods just feels too silly for you, that's fine. There are plenty of atheist religious pathways for you to travel in paganism.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that. The problem comes when these folks come waltzing into polytheist and animist circles and expecting to be leaders right off the rip. Not only do you not have the buy-in, not only do you not have any of the experiences necessary to be an effective leader, you don't even have the basics down of the worldview that makes those spiritual specialists and experts viable.
Yeah.
And that's not to shit on atheists, but I don't walk into an atheist convention thinking I'm going to convert them all to being polytheists.
Right. That would be rude.
That would be incredibly rude. If for some fucking reason I found myself at an atheist convention, I'm not going to try witnessing to these people about the wonders of worshiping Odin. They're not going to be fucking interested. And I don't feel like wasting my time.
That's also why I particularly appreciate that paganisms are not generally proselytizing religions,
Right.
because fucking I don't care what else. I don't care what you're doing. It's not my business.
Right. Again, this is where knowing evangelical behavior is not really a thing in polytheist religions, partly because, well, if they don't jive with this god, there's literally 1,000 other gods that direction.
Yeah.
You'll find somebody you click with.
Yeah.
So having that very basic idea of where you want to go, how you want to get there is really deeply important, but you don't have to have it set in stone. And you don't even really have to 100% know. You can just wander around until you find your path. That is completely valid.
Yep.
The problem comes when you start getting into situations where you're in ritual with other people and there are oaths being shared or there's experiences being had. And are you participating or are you observing? And these are different things.
Yep.
And it's okay to observe if that is okay in the context of the ritual.
Yeah.
It's okay to just be I don't know if I want to participate, but can I watch? And if the ritual is set up for that, that's great. And there's going to be somewhere that's just going to be a no-go. And again, knowing the basics.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is just, after a certain point, it's just lived.
Yeah.
And I think that's really where, when it comes down to brass tacks, we can talk about ad infinitum, this is what I see as the basics, this is how I practice, but it's a really individual but also communal journey that is unique to each person and how they do or don't fit into community.
Yeah. No, I would very much agree. Since we've been going for a little over an hour and a half, wrap up thoughts?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. I would say I really encourage people to, especially in trying times, fall back on the basics, because it's what did you call it? The activities for daily life.
Yeah.
ADLs. That's it.
ADLs. Activities for daily living.
I think it's important. I think it's good for you spiritually and physically to do these things, because those are not separate things. Those are tied in together.
Yep.
Grounding, centering, cleansing, shielding, and basic offering practices. I would say that those are things that, if you're in this podcast, you're probably pagan. You should probably be engaging in those. If you can't do it through energy work, then do it externally, right? Externalize it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I do that shit all the time. I can do the energy work. I'm relatively energy sensitive. I still externalize it all the time.
There's advantages to externalizing beyond, I can't visualize. Okay, but the other thing is that you're not spending as much energy, because if you're doing from a purely energetic mindset, or it's all up in here, sometimes you can lose contact with the fact that we are flesh and blood people for a fucking reason. Because if it's all upper head, I'm going to visualize this offering, if you're not actually giving something and it's all up in your head, you are potentially kind of subtly divorcing yourself from consensus reality, and that can be a problem long term.
Yes. There's some really interesting things about in Hindu and Vedic practices about mental offerings, but that's a whole genuinely hyper advanced practice.
Right.
That's not a today thing. That's a don't do that. That's not what we're talking about right now.
Right.
If you can build a temple to Shiva in your head, stone by stone, great, do that. You don't need to be listening to this podcast. You need to be working on your temple.
But I mean, just holding a stone and grounding by just squeezing it 3 times, for instance.
Yeah.
That is a legit form of grounding. And it does not have to be any more complex than that to be effective.
Yeah.
In point of fact, I've seen some incredible stuff done with just handing somebody a rock and going, hold this for a bit, you'll feel better.
Yep.
And just waiting.
Yep.
Actually, it's something my friend Cynthia does exceptionally well.
Have held the rock. Yes, very good.
Our friend, excuse me.
Yeah. Externalizing makes it easier on your body, not having to run everything magically only through your body every time. Exactly. Yep. It takes the effort off of you to do every single thing. Do I think that most people should at least be able to do the basics by themselves without a tool? Yeah, but also
we are human.
We're human. We are tool users, right? But yeah, that's my closing thoughts is externalize stuff if you've got to. Heck, I do it all the time. Do your basics. I would say once a day if you can, once a week at least. Offerings, I would say once a week at least. But as far as spiritual hygiene, I would say once a day if you can. Mm-hmm. I just feel better whenever I do, like legitimately.
Mm-hmm. A lot of my closing thoughts are, especially when it comes to basics and foundation, be sure that the directions you're looking in are places where you're not trying to make yourself fit into somebody else's box. Make sure that it feels like it's a good fit for you, that you're not fighting with yourself every step of the way.
Yeah.
Because if you are fighting with your practice as you're trying to engage in it, you're blowing a lot of energy that is not necessary. Part of your job as somebody who is new to a community or new to a practice or a religion is to engage with it. And if you can't, for whatever reason, that's fine to acknowledge and move on. But if the challenge that you're facing is, I have X, Y, and Z thing in my past and it comes up when I do this practice, what might be yours to do is not brute force through it, but just gently acknowledge and then move forward as best you can. Because if this is fulfilling something in you, if this is challenging you to be a better person, or if this is somehow making your life better, that struggle can be part of it, but it shouldn't eat your life. So a lot for me when it comes down to basics and foundations is not effortlessness, but the effort that I put in has some kind of useful dividend for myself and the communities that I'm seeking to be a part of.
Yep. Very much agreed.
So
right.
With that said.
Yeah. Thanks, folks, for being here for episode 62.
Right.
We'll catch y'all in the after party if you're willing to be there. And see y'all next time.
All right.
Thanks, folks.